Throughout The Sopranos, we've seen many occasions of ranking changes within the Soprano crew. From members finally getting made like Christopher and Eugene, to members getting a bump into being a captain like what we saw with Ralph and Carlo, to even seeing members leave the Mafia and try and join back like what we saw with Vito after his blood pressure medication stopped interfering with his personal life. But in Season 6, Episode 10, titled Moe N Joe, we are introduced to the conflict of Bobby potentially being promoted to a captain. While this decision may be the right decision, as by this time in the series, fans have been accustomed to Bobby Bacala for almost 6 seasons now, and he's certainly paid his dues by taking care of Tony's Uncle Jr. throughout the series. However, there are a few obstacles that stand in Bobby's way of being promoted if it ever were to happen. For starters, he's married to Tony's sister, Janice, as Janice is a woman who Tony clearly despises, as we learn that later on in this episode. And 2, Bobby is connected to the shooting of Tony, as on a deeper look into the shooting, the reasoning for it happening was due to Bobby playing with his toy train set, which resulted in Tony having to go take care of Uncle Jr. instead of Bobby and Janice. And we all know how that ended. Looking back to earlier on in the series, we sort of see a similar situation take place between once again Tony, Janice, and her then boyfriend at the time, Richie April, where Janice and Richie too were both frustrated with the amount of money coming into the family, with Richie not earning like he was expected to once being out of prison and being a made member. And to this, Janice was comparing Richie's current financial situation to that of a mailman. So from early on in the series, we can certainly see that Janice is very much a part of the Mafia's inner circle as much as Tony is, and that all Janice cares about really is money. The episode and this issue arises from a surprise visit to Tony at Satriale's from Bobby's wife, Janice. Now in this conversation, we see that Tony will take every chance he gets to make fun of Bobby, as we also saw this earlier on in the series numerous times.
I think it's time for you to start to seriously consider salads.
To the victor belongs the spoils.
Why don't you get the fuck out of here before I shove your quotations book up your fat fucking ass? I mean, get off my car before you flip it over, you fat fuck.
Also, during this conversation, we watch Janice try and force it out of Tony that he blames his sister and her husband for the reasoning on why he got shot by his very own Uncle Jr. But unfortunately for Janice, Tony won't admit to that, and he says he only has himself to blame. In a way here, during this conversation, Janice is not wrong. A brother-in-law to the boss should result in some sort of acknowledgement, whether this is special treatment, more jobs, more money, or in this case, a bump up to captain. This narrative is interesting because we all know that this is Janice's doing, because being a captain would mean more money for Janice, which means more money for Bobby and their family. And as we later see in the episode, Janice and Bobby move into a bigger home as a result of this situation. But deep down inside, as Tony mentions in this scene, he simply doesn't want to make Bobby a captain. And this is for a number of reasons. Like I mentioned earlier, it was basically Bobby and Janice's fault as to why Tony got shot in the first place. Bobby also has a deep connection towards Uncle Jr., who is the same man who shot Tony. And lastly, just like what Tony says at the end of this scene, even if Bobby were to get promoted to being a captain, Janice would still find something to complain about to Tony, because that's just how she is. And Tony certainly knows that. In Tony's eyes, he feels that Bobby isn't the right man for the job when being promoted at all. Bobby isn't your stereotypical mobster. Sure, he's masculine, a bigger guy, and has grown up around the Mafia his whole life. But at this particular point in the series, he has never committed a murder, and he was never ever known to having a Gumar. Bobby probably isn't respected across the board for these reasons alone, and as well as being connected to Junior. We also learn that Bobby has a fascination with toy train model kits, which also makes him look immature and weak. And we know for certain that Tony doesn't like this at all. If we really think about it, if Tony were to make Bobby a captain, and individuals within Tony's crew know that he likes to play with toy trains, then this would make Tony's crew look childish and immature. And if Tony were to make Bobby a captain, it would likely result in him hearing the same gossip coming from his crew, that of him playing favorites with his actual family instead of his mafia family, as we also saw this throughout the course of the series between Tony and Christopher, as their relationship made others in the family jealous. As the episode progresses, we later learn that Tony despises Janice for all of her wrongdoings that she did growing up. So as a result of this, Tony, being the evil brother that he is, he enjoys to see his sister suffer and not get what she wants. He enjoys not making Bobby a captain or granting his sister's wishes. So by now, during this episode, we can see that Tony is stubborn and will not make Bobby a captain. Later on, we watch Bobby visit a bookie in a sketchy part of town. And while coming out of the bookie, we watch Bobby get robbed and shot in the eye. While many viewers think that Bobby simply was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, I believe that Tony may have possibly set this entire situation up. As we've seen in the past, Tony is not afraid to use a third party when needed, as we saw this with the HUD real estate scam that saw Tony benefit financially off of some old copper in rundown homes, thanks to the help of Assemblyman Zellman. So if Tony has used kids from the ghetto to benefit himself before, why couldn't he do it again? It's possible that Tony could have paid off and set these kids up to rob Bobby for a particular reason. Having no Bobby around means no more complaining from his sister on bumping her husband up to captain. We learn from a conversation between Tony and Polly later in the episode that the police don't even go down to this neck of the woods anymore. So if Bobby were to have gotten assassinated that night, it's likely the police would have just swept his case under the rug, leaving Tony, the orderer of the hit, to be at peace on a likely cold case. What are your thoughts about this theory? Do you think Tony may have set up the potential robbery and shooting of Bobby in order for him to not get promoted to being a captain and have no more complaints coming from Janice? Let me know down in the comment section below. As always, for more Sopranos content, keep it locked here, right here on this channel.